He thought a little joke would make him a legend, but instead it unleashed chaos that no one saw coming. Tourists ran, a dog snapped, and the guards, they didn't flinch, but they did act. By the time the cuffs clicked, his smirk was long gone. Let me tell you how one man's ego turned him into the biggest punchline in town. Mark Henderson wasn't just the loudest guy in the room, he was the guy who made sure everyone knew it. At 32, he had built his personality around being that guy. Whether it was crashing weddings for free cake or live streaming pranks on strangers, Mark thought of himself as a master of comedy. Today, London's bustling Buckingham Palace was his stage, and the famed Royal Guards were his targets. "These guys are like mannequins in fancy hats," he joked to his buddy Ethan as they strolled past the gates. "Bet you $20 my boy Zeus can make one flinch." Ethan frowned, already sensing disaster. "Dude, don't mess with them. They're like legit military." Mark waved him off. "Relax, it's a joke. Everyone loves a good laugh, right?" Zeus, his hulking Rottweiler, wagged his tail, clueless that his owner was about to make him the star of yet another reckless stunt. The dog was all muscle and raw power, his glossy black coat glinting in the afternoon sun. Mark gave the leash a tug, steering Zeus toward a guard stationed near the gates. The soldier stood motionless, a red-coated statue with a rifle in hand, eyes fixed forward. Mark smirked. Time to see how loyal this guy is to his goofy hat. He crouched, whispering to Zeus. The dog let out a low growl, his posture shifting as he picked up on his owner's energy. A few tourists turned to watch, some pulling out their phones to record. Mark soaked it in. He lived for this. "Come on, man. You're really just gonna stand there?" Mark called out, his voice dripping with mockery. "Not even a twitch? What if my dog here decides he doesn't like your uniform?" Zeus barked, loud and sharp, drawing gasps from the crowd. The guard didn't flinch, though his grip on the rifle tightened. The tension was palpable, but Mark was too caught up in the moment to notice. "See that, Ethan? He's cracking," Mark jeered, laughing. Zeus barked again, louder this time, his muscular frame coiled like a spring ready to launch. The crowd grew uneasy. "That's enough, mate," a bystander called out, but Mark ignored them. Then it happened. The leash slipped. Zeus lunged, claws scraping against the cobblestones as he charged. Tourists shrieked, parents clutching their children. Phones captured every second as Zeus's growls turned feral. The guard remained calm, rifle raised in a defensive stance. "Zeus, stop!" Mark yelled, panic flashing across his face for the first time. But Zeus wasn't listening. With military precision, the guard barked a command that froze Zeus in his tracks. The dog halted, snarling just feet away. The square fell silent, save for the muffled cries of frightened children. Mark's laughter evaporated, replaced by a nervous grin. The tourists weren't laughing. They stared at him with a mixture of disgust and anger, their phones still recording. For the first time, Mark felt the weight of the moment. This wasn't just another prank. This time, it had gone too far. The moment Zeus leaped, the square exploded into chaos. Tourists gasped, children shrieked, and phones went up faster than a rocket launch. Before Zeus could make contact, another guard stepped in like a bolt of lightning, shouting so loud it echoed off the palace gates. Startled, Zeus hesitated, his momentum breaking as he stumbled back with a confused snarl. But Mark? He didn't even flinch. In fact, he was doubled over, his phone held high to capture the action. "Did you see that? The guard almost lost his cool," he howled, his laugh slicing through the rising panic. What Mark didn't realize, or didn't care about, was that this wasn't funny to anyone else. Families began scattering, parents clutching their kids as Zeus growled louder, his tail stiff and his posture rigid. One mother screamed as the dog lunged in her direction, forcing her to shield her toddler with trembling arms. The guard's voice boomed over the chaos, cutting through like a blade. "Control your animal, or we will take action." Finally, a flicker of reality crept into Mark's expression. All right, he muttered, fumbling for the leash. But Zeus wasn't done. The dog snapped and barked wildly, his frenzy feeding off the escalating tension. His claws scraped against the cobblestones, muscles rippling as he strained toward anyone who dared move too close. "Relax, it's just a joke," Mark yelled, his tone still riding that thin line between confidence and denial. He's just messing around. The guards didn't share Mark's sense of humor. Reinforcements emerged from the palace gates, moving with a precision that made the fleeing tourists look like a chaotic stampede. Zeus locked eyes with the approaching guards, his growl deepening as he bared his teeth. "You're making a scene," shouted a tourist, their voice trembling with a mix of anger and fear. Mark, desperate to salvage his crumbling spectacle, waved a hand dismissively. "It's fine. He's harmless, really." But harmless? Zeus lunged again, this time straight at the advancing guards. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. One of the soldiers stepped forward, his voice sharp and commanding. "Sit down." Somehow, the words cut through Zeus's frenzy. The dog froze mid-charge, his growls faltering as confusion flickered in his eyes. But the tension didn't break. The guards remained steady, their rifles held firm, their stares locked on Mark. Mark's bravado wavered. His grin was gone, replaced by a nervous chuckle as he glanced at the onlookers. "See, he listens, sort of." Then the real trouble arrived. A pair of officers pushed through the crowd, their uniforms crisp and their expressions set like stone. One of them pointed directly at Mark. "Step away from the dog." Mark hesitated, his hands frozen mid-gesture. "What? He's my dog. You can't just..." But they didn't wait for an explanation. Moving swiftly, one officer looped a restraint around Zeus's neck, while another snapped a muzzle over his snout. The dog thrashed briefly, but was quickly subdued. Mark's face drained of color as the officers turned their attention to him. "Sir, you are under arrest for public endangerment and assault with a dangerous animal." "What?" Mark stammered, his voice rising an octave. "This is a misunderstanding. It was just a joke." The officers didn't flinch. One reached for Mark's hands, and the cold bite of handcuffs followed with an audible click. The crowd erupted, not in protest, but in applause. Phones recorded every angle of Mark's humiliation as he stood there, frozen in disbelief. As the officers led him away, one guard leaned in close, his voice low enough for only Mark to hear. "You think this was funny? Let's see if the headlines agree." Mark swallowed hard. For once, he didn't have a punchline. Mark slumped in the back of the police van, his head pounding like a drumbeat. His arms ached from the cuffs, and every bump in the road felt like the universe's way of driving home just how badly he'd messed up. He squirmed, trying to shake the growing pit in his stomach. "Do you even know who I am?" he blurted out, his voice cracking with a mix of frustration and desperation. If he could just get them to see the humor, maybe this wouldn't spiral any further. One of the officers turned slightly, giving him a cold, unimpressed glance. "Oh, we know exactly who you are." The tone sent a chill down Mark's spine. This wasn't the reaction he'd expected. He forced a nervous laugh, but it fizzled out when the van came to a screeching halt in front of the station. The moment they pulled him inside, the gravity of his situation hit like a freight train. A wall of monitors filled the room, each screen looping clips of him pulling his infamous pranks. There he was, taunting street performers, chasing pigeons through crowded parks, and now the piece de resistance, terrorizing a royal guard with his Rottweiler. And just when he thought it couldn't get worse, his latest stunt had gone viral. The headline on the largest screen screamed at him in bold letters, "American tourist sick prank on royal guard sparks international outrage." Mark's heart sank. His face was plastered across every feed. Beneath the video, comments scrolled in real time, each one hitting harder than the last. "This is why tourists have a bad name." "That poor dog didn't deserve this." "Throw the book at him." For the first time, the attention he craved felt suffocating. An officer nudged him forward, breaking his trance. "Let's go, you've got a lot to answer for." The arraignment felt like a bad dream. Every charge, read aloud, was another nail in the coffin. Reckless endangerment, animal cruelty, public disturbance. Each word stung more than the last. "What about Zeus?" Mark finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. His cocky demeanor was gone, replaced with a flicker of genuine concern. The judge's gavel slammed down, the sound reverberating through the courtroom. "The animal will be placed in protective custody. You, Mr. Henderson, will remain in jail until further notice." Mark's shoulders sagged as the weight of the verdict crushed whatever confidence he had left. As the guards led him out, one leaned in close, his voice barely audible. "Next time you think it's funny to mess with someone doing their job, maybe think twice." Mark didn't respond. He couldn't. When they reached the exit, the scene outside was a nightmare. Dozens of people had gathered, holding signs and chanting slogans. Animal rights activists waved banners that read, "Justice for Zeus," while angry locals shouted for harsher penalties. Cameras flashed in his face, capturing every second of his downfall. The man who had built his identity on being a jokester was now the target of everyone's outrage. His name was trending for all the wrong reasons, and no amount of smooth talk could undo the damage. They placed him in a holding cell, the cold steel bars a far cry from the spotlight he loved so much. Alone, with only his thoughts for company, the realization finally hit him. This wasn't a joke anymore. His laughter, once his trademark, now felt like a hollow echo in the silence. For Mark Henderson, the show was over, and the only audience left was himself. What would you have done in Mark's place? Do you think his actions were just a joke gone wrong, or was it something more serious? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you or someone you know ever witnessed a situation like this? Let us know what you think. Don't forget to like this post if it made you reflect, and share it to spread awareness. This story is made to shine a light on real-world issues, to spark conversations, and hopefully make the world a better place. Your opinion matters. Together, we can inspire change.